All right, welcome back to part two. During week two, we're going to continue on talking about some keywords, getting some key discussion terms in there, get you locked and loaded and ready to go with this. So if I haven't already overwhelmed you with the dictionary, we'll probably be a little more overwhelmed today. However, a lot of the terminology we'll cover in this particular lecture should be fairly familiar to yourself and to many others. Let's take a look at the terminology here. Let's think about geography. Well, what is geography? Well, really, it's the study of Earth and its systems, the inhabitants, and the processes that exist on Earth. This is one of those terms that honestly, and the definition therein, that I often use even in my other geology classes. It's the interaction of the planet, the interaction of the things through time and through space in which things interact. That's our concept for geography. Well, we can also have physical geography, right? The study of Earth's environmental processes, the topography, the lumps and the bumps of the mountains and how they formed, the deltas and the stream channels, right? Those meandering streams, if you will. Human geography, the study of people and how their activities vary. We can also have a cultural aspect that definitely comes into play there that is influenced by the physical geography aspect just as well. Environmental studies, the systematic study of human interactions with the environment. These are often used to help solve complex problems. Human geography, physical geography, all tie in with that. And GI science ties in there too, of course. Geomatics is an interesting one. It's the collection, distribution, and storage, if you will, and analysis, and the processing of data, and presentation, of geographic data or information. This is generally used from a survey standpoint or a surveyor standpoint, but it is another form, if you will, of engineering and GI science that exists. We also have urban and regional geography. Makes sense. How are we going to build up? How are we going to build out? How is society impacting the building up and the building out in an area? So those are our definitions behind geography, or the graphical study of the earth. Well, the graphical study of the earth ties very closely with the next topic, cartography. Cartography, here we're going to state, is the study and practice of making maps, develops theories for visualizing and communicating information in space. Well, I'd like to go back for a minute and say, not only is it the study and practice of map making, but it's also the science of map making. While cartography is very important, the graphics that we see, and they're beautiful a lot of the time. I think that's what draws most of our eyes to maps, is how beautiful they can be. But we also have to note that a GIS analyst, oftentimes getting data is just the beginning, and posting that on a map is, again, just the beginning of the map making process, the cartographic elements. Where the science side of cartography comes into play is, how do these points, these data plotted on a map, actually mean something? How are they related? What is the spatial relationship and interpretation that may impact society? That is where the science part of the GI science comes into play with cartography. So we want to keep that in mind. Bear that in mind, especially as we go through this class and other courses, and heck, even as we're just making observations. It's fun to make a map. It's fun to look at a map. But what is the connection that the map implies? That's what matters. Geospatial, that's just a fancy term for geography, to be honest with you. But there's a big caveat. It's geography with an emphasis on technology. So if we look at the image on the left here, this is very much like doing INSAR flyovers, recording LiDAR or elevation data, and being able to map that out. U.S. Geological Survey is running that all the time. On the other hand, what about folks at Tesla and other companies that are using spatial awareness and even image recognition to identify where a stop sign is when there's a soccer ball in the middle of the street, and hence telling the car, you need to apply the brakes? That's what we're talking about when it comes to geospatial. It's the technologies that allow us to collect the data and then apply those data to the cartography and bring some inference as to what is going on in society and around the globe. One of the interesting things about geospatial is it's become a pretty in vogue term. As a matter of fact, there's this thing known as the geospatial revolution, and you can find it right here through Pennsylvania State University's link. They created, in partnership with WPSU, a PBS station, they created a public service media project This is a series, right now it's a 5-part series that outlines how geospatial technologies are changing the world, how they're influencing us day after day, from the point of, hey, where's the nearest McDonald's or the nearest Starbucks, to how do I know if that area is prone to landslides? So this product, this media project, if you will, is set to share how that spatial information and science influences nearly everything in our lives today. They state that their mission is to increase public understanding, strengthen interest in math, science, and technology, and inspire the next generation. That idea of math, science, and technology, that sounds a lot like GI science to me, a lot like the geospatial revolution that they're publicizing. So some pretty cool stuff. Check it out. 5-part series out there right now, with more hopefully on the way soon. Well, here we're talking about the technology, but let's go back to some of the fundamentals for just a minute. What about space, 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 space? All right, nobody can hear you screaming space, let alone echo, but there we are. Space in this case is looking at a Euclidean concept. Basically, it's a concept that we're looking at and mapping, identifying objects that are being placed within an empty container. That empty container is essentially the world, and what we choose to see is what gets put into that container. It's really counter concept in relation space, in the sense of this is close to that, which is close to that. Really, Euclidean concept is an XYZ standpoint, 3D space. It deals with relating or denoting the system of geometry based on the work of Euclid and corresponding to the geometry of an ordinary experience. What is that fancily saying? What is that philosophy that we're floating around here? Really, it's a concept in mathematics that represents the flat, familiar world which we live in. So it's taking a 3D object and extrapolating that mathematically into 2D or planar space, into a 2D map, something that's 3D, and it's got to be reprojected into 2D. We'll talk more about the distortions that can occur and some of the maths that need to be applied a little bit later in the class when we talk about projections or map projections. But in this case, taking that 3D space and mathematically then being able to apply and talk about points, lines, and polygons in a more straightforward manner. That's the concept of Euclidean space. Now, you can imagine it as a big piece of white paper that's been put out there, and it's in 2D. There are no curves, no bends. But when we start plotting data on that paper, the distances between one point and the other are preserved. They're not distorted because of the way that we've gone from 3D to 2D, as I've already hinted at. We're familiar with this concept, the idea that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. I know you've heard that before numerous times over. That is what we're looking at. We're looking at avoiding distortion so that those two distances are accurate despite the world being round. That's our concept behind Euclidean space. And it follows simple, very simple rules in the plane of X, Y, and Z, being able to take that and project it into 2D space or planar space. Okay, this is used widely every day. It's used in branches of mathematics and especially in physics. It's geometry as we know it. Okay, so think about space and the concept of that blank piece of paper that has been turned from a 3D object to that 2D piece of paper. And so we need to fill that space with all the appropriate items that we are studying. So that's where we also want to think about, well, is this going to be ontology or epistemology to help us define what we need? And what about subjectivity and objectivity, as we've already talked about? What goes into it? Speaking of those terms, you'll note that last time we had talked a little bit about nature and how nature is essentially a human terminology or a human term, if you will, that was developed in our vernacular. So when we think about landscape, this is the appearance of the physical world. It's not just the general vast idea and concept of nature out in the wild, but it's a visual realm. It's very much like nature, which was the first concept of studying something that is fixed in a natural realm. For example, a tree or a forest that exists in nature, right? Later on, we could go on and say, well, there are cultural landscapes that exist as well. Maybe it'd be something associated with Angkor Wat, or it may be something that is in the physical world that may impact someone in a cultural sense, right? Things like that. But then when we step back and look at what landscape actually means, it means the way of seeing. This is stemming from traditional European landscape painting, okay? Painting of gardens, painting of landscapes, not to overuse the word landscape, but it's really the creation of a manufactured natural sphere over which a person can claim control. So when we think about landscapes, we want to think of this as kind of a loosey-goosey made-up term, but it's something that we actually can, in essence, control or take data to visually see what's going on within that realm of control. It's where we can recognize what is going on in the physical world. Okay, so it's a very loose term. It probably feels very philosophical. And again, it probably feels like I'm sounding like Morpheus from the Matrix. It was a red pill or a blue pill. Well, if that wasn't difficult, then maybe this too difficult, maybe it was too difficult. Let's take a look at this next concept, place. Place is essentially a bound locale. More humanistically, it's a sense of place. Just like you say, there's no place like home, that brings a sense of feeling. Oh, should send a red flag right there by saying it's a sense of feeling, right? Because now we're tippy-toeing out of these realms of subjective and into this idea of objective and vice versa, right? Separating the two out, we need to be able to do that. Place is one of those that hits feelings, and so we have to be very cautious with that. A really good example of this is that in 2009, LA Times did a study, and they have geographers that help assist with this and spatial scientists who assisted with this. But in 2009, they took 87 neighborhoods of LA, and they wanted readers of LA Times that lived in those neighborhoods and even outside of those neighborhoods to redraw the boundaries, to also help designate if they agree or disagree with the boundaries that are currently drawn today. The results were kind of astonishing, but at the same time, probably not too surprising. Readers didn't just comment about the boundaries, but they sent hundreds and hundreds of messages and notes in. These consisted of short essays on places that they lived, even to the point of poems and often very eloquent ideas. But they also sent informative information. They sent humorous information. They sent information that was thought-provoking about the neighborhoods in which they reside, the poverty-stricken areas, and the more ritzy areas. They also sent things that maybe were not as valuable because, again, we're slipping that subjective idea in there very quickly. But the outcomes were very interesting. They were intriguing, insightful for the city of Los Angeles to consider. And this project actually continues on today, and it's going out globally to see how you would draw boundaries now. Now, if you think about ontology, you think about epistemology, this may not be the most perfect way of drawing it, but sometimes the people that are experiencing what's going on in their neighborhood are going to be more apt to be able to tell folks that are in charge how things actually work in the real world. So that concept of place, again, caveat, it's subjective, but it's humanistically and holistically there. It's easy for people to coincide with and understand. So that's our concept there with place. Very, very similar, if you will, to landscape, but landscape is more similar to nature as our human definition defines it. Okay, so now we've gotten through this vocabulary. More of these concepts will come up into play in future months and in future lectures as well. But let's shift gears for just a minute and let's take a look at the Module 1 deliverables. Module 1 deliverables, Project 1A, Project 1B, both coincide with the text Getting to Know ArcGIS Pro. In this case, I believe we're still using 2.8. Project 1A and Project 1B have different due dates, so keep those in mind. In a minute, we'll switch over and I'll show you those due dates and how you can access these on Canvas. So keep that in mind again. We'll switch over in a sec, like I said. Project 1A, you're going to want to refer back to, if you've not done so, you're going to want to refer back to how you download ArcGIS Pro and how you're going to start implementing the use of these data within ArcGIS Pro. Okay. RRD, or Research and Reading and Research Discussion 1, also has 2 parts. The first part you will need to get done and make your initial post 1 week before the second post or the second part is actually due. And part of the reasoning for that is it gives you a week to procrastinate commenting on your peers' posts. Ooh, I don't mean procrastinate. None of us procrastinate, right? but it actually gives you a week and your peers a week to comment and actually have a conversation. So like I said, let's switch gears for just a sec. Let's take a look at what's available on Canvas for these modules, in particular Project 1A, 1B, as well as RRD1. So we'll switch here now, and then we'll come on back. All right, as mentioned, we're going to take a look at where we can find RRD1 and also where we can find Project 1 and some information about those. So when you land on your Canvas page, going over to classes, make sure you've got Geology 230, Intro to GIS. If you are getting this video, odds are you've already explored this a little bit, as you are encouraged to do in the intro video for the course. And what you can do is you can do a couple of different things. You can come over here to assignments and find them. You can even come to discussions and find them. We're going to start with modules. So your view is going to be a little different from mine. I'm coming here to modules, and you can see there's a bunch of stuff for week 1. Here are the lectures which you've been looking at. Here's the resume assignment that you've tackled. And here is Project 1, thread 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's an extra credit thread that's also part of this that I'll make sure gets added in here. But you can also see that under discussions. But if you need to, you can pretty much come in here and take a look at these. Let's start with RRD1. I'm going to click on that. It opens up and it's going to give you the outline. As mentioned, yours is due September 3rd. And that's for your initial posting, and your discussion board is due September 10th. This is approximately 4% of your grade that this assignment is worth. So it gives you a good description and details about what's going on in this assignment, gives you some learning objectives, so you should be able to summarize and interpret fundamental spatial concepts. You should be able to identify an example project or case study that exhibits evidences of key spatial concepts that we've been learning about, especially in a noteworthy way. And then you should be able to engage in a discussion with your peers about these concepts. So you're going to come in here, you're going to complete the readings that are listed in the syllabus for weeks 1, and then you're going to turn around and you're going to look at and conduct online research to find a GIS concept dealing with epistemology or onotology or the modifiable area unit problem, or representation, or spatial autocorrelation, okay? Some of these we haven't touched on quite yet, but we're going to be getting into that. Okay, when you think about modifiable area unit problem, basically has to do with how we're aggregating data together, and spatial autocorrelation we've actually touched on when we were defining the natural land coverage and use data sets. How far does something extend outward versus where does it cut off? Okay, but you're going to be looking for a topic related to these, or actually you're going to be looking for a paper related to one of these. Not all of these, just one. You only need to choose one. Okay, you're going to share your study. You're going to list either a PDF or URL. And what you're going to turn around and do is you're going to also respond to questions. So you've got all the details here. So thread 1, discussion board. That's where you're posting your PDF and your article. You're going to describe and summarize the project that you found. That's worth 1.5 points. Thread 2, you're going to look at responding to the questions in step 4. So all these questions up here, what types of phenomena? If they were tasked with mapping one such phenomena, okay, how would you respond to those? How would you deal with those? That's worth a point. And then finally, you're going to take an active role in responding to your classmates. Okay, that is all part of dealing with this for threads 1 and threads 2. Okay, and so there we are looking at discussion 1. Now, you need to be able to respond to your peers. That means you need to post, and your peers need to post by September 3rd to give you a week, and your peers a week to respond by September 10th. That is where that is. That is the concept and the idea behind this RRD. Okay, so go ahead and look at that. Thread 1, thread 2, get posted on those. And if I wanted to see those, again, if I wanted to, I can come back to modules, and I can look under my week, and I can come down here, and I can find RRD thread 1, and I can click on that. And here it is. I outline at a high level what you need to be doing. Please make sure you understand what I am asking you to do before you post here. And it's as simple as coming in and clicking reply, and it will set up a whole new text field that you can respond to, and you can post that reply, and people can actually like and respond to your posting. That is what I'm asking you to do. Have a conversation about this. Now, If you're like, man, Cole, that's a lot under week 1. That's a lot. It feels overwhelming. We can break this down in other ways. Notice how discussions is now highlighted. I'm going to go to discussions. I'm going to open that up. Oh, overwhelming again. I'm just kidding. It's not entirely overwhelming, but when we look at it, there's RRD1, thread 1, and thread 2. Both are right here. Do the same thing. If I look at thread 2, I'm outlining what's going on. There are the 2 questions that we are addressing. Okay, so you can access these threads either from the discussions tab here on Canvas or under modules. And the same thing goes for assignments. I'm going to click on assignments, try to overwhelm you a little bit. But if I come in here to assignments, I can also find when it is open, I can find project 1, and I can go ahead and I can open up project 1 and I can take a look at that. Here's project 1. I'm going to open it up. It does the same thing as it would under modules. I give you some high-level instructions, but what I want to emphasize is this PDF that is right here will actually give you all the details that you need, okay? All the details that you need. So you've got multiple threads to respond to and to post on, and it gives you specific instructions almost step by step on how you would get this information and what you need to do, okay? So make sure you look at these. Again, the assignment has some high-level instructions, but the PDF is going to give you the full instructions for the projects. And part of that is because some of these get a little detailed, and I understand that you probably want to be able to come in here, download the PDF, and possibly print out and or highlight things both digitally or in the printout. Okay, so anything under the instructions here for the projects you will find with directions. You will also find how the grading will work on these. There's also a rubric that's generally associated with these. I haven't got it posted for the project 1 yet, but if we look at this, there is a zip file for all the data that you need. These are the same data that come right out of that Getting to Know ArcGIS Pro book, ArcGIS Pro 2.8 that is. And so you can download that. It's a pretty big file, unzip it, and that has all the data that you need to execute the exercises within Getting to Know ArcGIS Pro 2.8. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. A lot. I know it feels like it's a lot, but once you get in here, get this practice, like I said, get the ebb and the flow down, you really get the feel of it, you'll be doing just fine. You'll be in good shape, so don't worry too much about it, okay? Just hang in there, and we'll get you through it. As usual, let me know if you have any questions. We'll switch back over, finish up this lecture, and we'll be able to turn you loose for week 2 in preparation for week 3 and these assignments that are coming due pretty quick. All right, now that we've taken a look at that within Canvas, please let me know if you have any further questions or issues in accessing ArcGIS Pro and or the data files. As I outlined earlier in Canvas, the data files are all there. If you've purchased the Getting to Know ArcGIS Pro text, then you will also have access to download those files just as easily, okay? For the RRDs, I encourage you to use the Cuesta library, use Google Scholar, and also look at anything that you search online. The key there, as already emphasized, and I will continue to emphasize, is that you want to find things that are peer-reviewed. I think I've emphasized in the past that, hey, National Geographic is phenomenal. However, it is not actually a peer-reviewed journal, meaning that folks write articles, the editor approves them, and they go out. Those scientific articles, while based on good, solid theory, aren't really peer-reviewed by the folks that are studying them. So that article that was phenomenal about King Tut, it went out, but other archaeologists may not have peer-reviewed that. So Nat Geo may not be the best source. You may want to find actual publications that are out there dealing with the concepts of RRD1. If you get hung up on this, let me know. It should be a fairly simple approach to just doing a Google search, finding a paper that's accessible. If you need to go through the Cuesta library, you have access to a lot of journals. You should not have to, and I do not want you to be paying for any articles. There are plenty of free publications out there that are peer-reviewed, and Cuesta pays for publications to some of these journals, so make sure you use those. One last thing before we part in this lecture, though, is my expectations for citations. So when you're finding your sources, you're finding your paper, and you're posting into the RRD1, or as you get ready to write reports the rest of the semester, I want you to please use the Chicago manual style. That is available in a Canvas post You'll be able to see it under the modules, right above all the modules, and you'll be able to find the Chicago Manual of Style, which is linked in that post, and it will show you how you should be formatting your citations or works cited and how that incorporates and rolls into everything that we're doing with our RDs and with the projects. Now that it sounds like I've had my dad pants and I've lectured you the whole time, I'm going to conclude and say, hey, again, let me know if you have questions. Hit me up via email, shoot me a text, or as I prefer, please send me a message over Canvas so that way I can keep everything in one area. But if you really get hung up, reach out to me. I'm here to help you with the technology standpoint of Arc Pro, but being able to get your questions answered and for you to rock and roll. All the while, I hope that you do this. I hope you learn a lot, and I hope you have fun looking at our world through the lens of GIS. We'll catch you in the next video.